My name's Nick Luxmoore, and my new book is called Young People, Death and the Unfairness of Everything. Although there are a surprising number of young people who have experienced the death of people who have mattered to them in their short lives, and even more young people who have experienced all kinds of losses in their lives, this is less a book about bereavement and more about a book about young people living with the fact of life being finite, which is much more of a preoccupation for them than adults, I suspect, would like to believe. And that young people get very few opportunities to talk about death and to talk about the point of life, the point of death. Why do we have to die? What's that all about? Because adults are so find that such a difficult subject themselves that they choose to believe that it's not a preoccupation for young people. It is. This book describes the ways in which young people, unless they get opportunities to think and to talk about those things, will find ways of expressing their resultant anxieties about those things in all kinds of ways which are sometimes personally and socially destructive. It's a book about, for example, the ways in which we might attach to people in order to put off the fear of death, in order to make ourselves feel safer. It's a book about whether things happen randomly in life or whether they happen for a particular reason, whether there's a great controller up above who's causing all this to happen, or whether we are the agents of our own lives and our own destinies. It's a book about young people asking, what's the point? And what a really good question that is, a question that young people should ask, without adults feeling that they have to have answers, but where adults can just join them in that questioning. That's a really, really good question, and we can think about it together without feeling that we have to strive towards some preordained conclusion. I want to read a little bit from one of the chapters in the book. This is a chapter about death as an authority figure, and this little piece is a piece about a girl who I've called Faith. Faith fights with the school system. Faith is still at school, obviously. Faith fights with the school system to prove that she isn't afraid of it and doesn't care. Her fighting certainly gets her recognised, but at the same time does her no favours. She's rude to teachers, gets into trouble with the police, and rows constantly with her mother at home. It's so unfair, she complains. I agree with her that things in her life have been unfair. They may not have been anyone's fault, but they've been unfair nonetheless. She didn't deserve her parents' fighting, or her stepbrother's bullying, or her kidney problems, which are refusing to go away. I assure her that although she may have been powerless at earlier times in her life, she does now have some power, the power to get herself excluded from school. Her teachers can try their best to support her. They can think up all kinds of helpful strategies to stop her getting into trouble, but ultimately she can get herself excluded if she chooses. For Faith, this experience of having power is exciting, but scary. When they fight at home, her mother always gives in and Faith always wins. "My mum spoils me," she says, embarrassed, well aware that she shouldn't be winning all the time. So, having beaten her mother, she transfers her fight to a more robust enemy called school, where she can properly test her strength. At school, teachers resist her power, fighting her at every turn. Her sense of this school she's forever fighting is about much more than just a set of buildings and teachers. This school in her head is a mother, a father, a whole world of fairness and unfairness. She rages, daring it to do its worst, wondering if it'll carry out its threats, wondering if it really cares. She tries to outsmart it. She pleads for special privileges, and when school won't oblige, she rails against its non-negotiable, unfair authority. In her fights with school, she can certainly get herself excluded, but as with the authority of death, she can never win. She could give up. Excluded from school, she could surrender herself to a life of abject drug-taking and daytime television, refusing to engage with life, and effectively committing a kind of suicide, letting death do whatever it wants. I don't give a shit, see if I care. The alternative to abject surrender or endless fighting would be to find some way of living with the seeming unfairness of authority while still finding satisfaction in her life, of living in an imperfect world but creating all kinds of interesting ripples. I don't care, she keeps saying. I make a comment about school refusing to go away. Yeah, I know, but I don't care. Fighting her assertion, I'm sure you do care really, Faith, would be pointless. Of course she cares, but this is really about her determination not to feel powerless. I remind her of the unfair things in her life, her parents, her stepbrother, her kidneys. I wonder why unfair things happen. Because life sucks, she says. I don't know. How should I know? We both smile. Life does suck, I say, especially when unfair things happen which aren't our fault, which we never asked to happen and which we can't control. She agrees. And there are lots of things we can't control, I suppose. Things that are annoying and unfair, and things that we haven't got any power to do anything about. She looks unconvinced. I remind her of the prayer that goes, Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. She doesn't understand. It's like fighting the battles we have to fight and not fighting the ones we don't have to fight and can never win. Yeah, she says, but school really pisses me off. I know it does, I say, but the trouble is that school will always win. It has to win to survive. So do I. We both laugh and move on to talking about other things, but like bursting into tears or bursting into anger, our laughter is cathartic. It's a release, a kind of acceptance. Faith knows that I approve in principle of her feistiness. Laughing together, we acknowledge the impossibility of the situation, Faith's stubbornness versus the stubbornness of school. She has her power, but so does school. She can never be the outright winner. Despite her attempts to destroy it, school will be there long after she's gone. Any young person's relationship with school is always part of a broader relationship with authority and, deep down, with the authority of death. All Faith's battles about rules, 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 and the unfairness of rules are ultimately about death, because death is the ultimate authority figure, the rule that can never be broken. Paradoxically, we're imprisoned but also liberated by death. Quote, death destroys a man, the idea of death saves him, unquote. That's a quote from E.M. Forster. For young people, growing older involves trying to understand this paradox. How exactly can rules of any kind liberate us? Surely freedom means having no rules at all. The rules young people fight about, bedtimes, computer use and seeing friends, for example, are only the tip of an iceberg. There are official explicit rules, such as say please and thank you and I want you in by 9 o'clock. But there are dozens of other unofficial, unspoken, implicit rules, such as never get angry with dad or don't ask questions about the past. These implicit rules underpin everything, and they're much harder to understand because no one ever writes them down or explains how they came about. Death is an implicit rule. Why do we have to die? Because everyone dies. Yeah, I know, but why? And so the chapter goes on. I hope you like the book. It looks like this, and it's available on sale from Jessica Kingsley Publishers and really, really, really good bookshops.